Welcome back to the Forecast, brought to you by Headstorm, the show that teaches you how to engineer growth by learning from industry luminaries to provide you with tactical steps you can use tomorrow. Hi, I'm Julian Placino, host of Headstorm Forecast. In today's forecast, cybersecurity expert Alex Cherrones is joined by Arash Marzban. Arash is the Vice President of Product Development at Ag Resource Management. He is at the forefront of pioneering data-driven solutions aimed at some of today's thorniest issues. Today, he's talking about the productization of ransomware. He's also going to give us an inside look at his method for bringing trust and transparency to cybersecurity. Arash, it's an honor. Let's get started.
We see massive changes in the amount of attacks that we're seeing today.
Sure.
Chief, or shall I say, continue to be chief among them, happens to be ransomware as the most common form of attack that we're seeing right now. The most recent articles I'm reading are there's an attack happening every 10 seconds. Phishing continues to be the most prominent among them. And we're seeing a massive uptick based on the fact that there's the advent of ransomware as a service. Sure. You've got a lot of bad actors out there doing bad things for other people. And just like if I want to go to one of the cloud providers to buy compute, storage, you name it, I have the same opportunity nowadays to do that with ransomware. Is that right?
That's right, and it's fascinating because if you think about how the economy worked beforehand, right, in security, it was an independent actor. The threats were different, and now you've got I would say the migration from folks that were at one point script kiddies that would pick up code and just play with it,
right,
and they've turned these into businesses, and so for them it's a cut. And I think the cryptocurrency market has made this even more complicated, where beforehand ransomware was more difficult to manage, but now with a little bit of clever planning, you can hide your tracks relatively well. And so, hey, this business model has gone from extorting like a local business and ma and pa shop because of call it coverage or safety on the street corner to literally any company in the world can get hit by it. And the weakest point of entry is people,
yep.
Right? I mean, that's where these things start. One person clicks the wrong button in an app in a platform. I've seen employees at companies, and it's fascinating. Get hit or get stuck by the fact that they get a request from the CEO on their cell phone to buy gift cards because the CEO's at this trade or conference and need some things to hand out, and they go do it.
You've done this several times.
I've done it several times. Yeah. You have no idea. My entire retirement account's been drained by this mistake. So what it tells you is that if humans are the weakest point, that ability to identify that you're being duped, right? A con man does a great job from when in a restaurant or in a relationship or whatever it might be, versus now I can get a text message and be duped that easily. And depending on where I'm working with and what the culture of the company is, you might even feel that it's a normal request coming in. So it's fascinating. Yeah.
Wild.
So we took a lot of places there, but yeah, it's insane. It's only going to get worse.
So you talk about script kiddies.
Sure.
Give me a little bit more context on that.
Yeah.
These are the folks that kind of have prepackaged exploits and they just kind of spray and pray, as we say.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about who they are, what they do, and some of the different actors. So it used to be something that was a little bit, novice or juvenile in nature. Now we're seeing that the bad actors evolve, they organize. I'm hearing that there's actually call centers, and you can actually rate your experience with ransomware nowadays, right? Is that what I'm hearing?
I love it. Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, it's productization, right? So in any context, you take technology, you take an interesting solution, and you convert it into a business, a repeatable business model. And that's what these guys have done. And you don't need to be an expert coder. You don't need to really understand how to get there. You're doing more social engineering with like a basic software package. And so when I use the term script kiddie, this isn't the guy who's like a nation state level trained by the US or Russia or some other particular country and understands, like, I can go build all this incredible tooling to go exploit
Right.
people. This is the individual that's like, oh, cool, I picked up a package that'll hold a system or a platform ransom, and now it's all about just me taking the right steps to socially engineer
Right.
getting that package deployed in the company, and whether that's an email that I send and someone clicks on the wrong link, or whatever it might be, right? Or I embed my code someplace else. There's other avenues, but it's fascinating, and so it's the productization of security threats, or call it hacking or whatever aspect you want to use. But it's a fascinating, I would say, kind of structure to it. But like, you look at the drug industry, right? And the commercialization and scale that they employed and how they built up, let's say, a McDonald's level distribution system, but it was obviously drugs, not hamburger buns. And you look at the same concept and you say, well, okay, if the commodity's there's always people on both sides of the fence, good and those that are maybe ethically questionable, that'll create a business model out of it. And that's what we're seeing. And it doesn't take heavy skill. It just takes aptitude for business ultimately. So, yeah.
So let me get this straight. Pulling off ransomware attacks no longer requires sophisticated bad guys. Now, anyone who is a little computer savvy can just go buy a ransomware package. That's a combination that makes for huge ROI. Now, for our next segment in the forecast, what tactics and techniques are becoming commonplace among ransomware gangs and their affiliates?
So you talked about a bunch of good stuff in there, and
I do that often.
I do want to focus on a few of them. So
Sure.
carbon-based life forms, bad.
Yeah, always.
Terrible,
Yeah,
or the worst.
we can tell.
Yes,
Yeah, it's a lot of history about that.
Okay, so we're terrible. Number two, you talked about cybersecurity insurance.
Sure.
And so from the advent, really, or shall I say the popularization of ransomware, you've seen the advent of its counterbalance or attempted counterbalance.
Sure.
Being, hey, we'll insure you for any kind of damages.
Right.
But the problem that we're seeing nowadays is this whole term of supply chain hacking.
Sure.
And supply chain attacks.
Sure.
And so one of the things that we're seeing now as it pertains to insurance policies is they'll actually say, okay, I want to go after you, but in order for me to do that, I want to make sure exactly how much you're insured for. And so what do? Well, I'm actually going to go after and find out, once I've compromised you, I'm not actually going to launch an attack at that point. I'm going to go find out, once I'm in your systems, who your provider is, who your insurance carrier is, and I'm going to go pop them next so I can better understand your coverage limits.
Right.
And then I'm going to come back to you and then pop you.
Sure.
And lock down everything, and then I'm going to come in $1, $100 under your policy limit.
So if you take this war tactic, right, which it's been around for as long as I think humans have been, and I'm an odd fan of like feudal warfare or especially like traditional Japanese history and culture.
Yep, you're odd.
And I am very odd. And it's fascinating. You know, one of the attack tactics used back then, and it's used in the military even today, is the concept of I'm gonna tease and find the weak points, right? And if I can get in and if I can infiltrate, then I can potentially mimic, right, whoever I'm fighting. And what these guys are doing, just like you've said it, is they're getting insight, getting data to create a bigger plan. Like their strategy isn't just pop company number one.
Right.
That was just a point of entry.
Right.
The insight is I need to learn about them. I want to gain insight, and every data point's more context of what else I could do, who else I could go attack. And if the outcome you're looking for is just money or control or whatever it might be, whatever cyber warfare kind of action you're trying to take, it all comes down to, in my view, the data sets that you can gather. So you get the context, like you said, from company one, you go to company two, and you start building the storyline. And what ends up happening is that the insight you get gives you new targets to go after, new companies to target that are higher value ultimately. And I think you touched on something that, you know, there's not a lot of coverage out there in the security world for, which is what does your true supply chain look like, right? If you're looking at vendors and services that you have within your ecosystem, the only way you're managing them is locking them down. But you know, you have an event where one provider who's providing data or providing services to many, which is very common, as you know, they get breached, then you've got a gamut of exposure, right? And the data set's the piece that matters the most. It's not even the loss. And oftentimes companies don't know for many days. Like there's the dwell time metric. They don't know for a long time that they've even been breached, that data's been stolen, that something's happened. And normally they find out because something else happened or their data shows up elsewhere and like, oh my God, what happened? Let's go figure it out. So it's fascinating, but it's not always direct, to your point. It is indirect attacks. And then you have to think about the quality or the type of threat actor, right? So your basic ones to me are your ransomware deployment centers, if you will, like you go to Costco and you buy I'll take the ransomware package number 1, please, and let me go target these 3 companies. And then you've got the ones that are really sophisticated, and they're the ones who are building a strategic approach to dismantling. I don't want to say they're dismantling corporate America, but they're definitely taking a good swipe at it for the sake of benefit or gain, right? There's a lot of money at play.
And when we talk about benefit and gain specifically, it means different things to different people. So you've got a couple of different bad actor kind of personas that you've defined over the course of the conversation. So far, you've got script kiddies kind of on the low end and novice side. Then you've got kind of the most sophisticated being your nation states. And then you've got folks in between, like organized crime, like think about old school mafia. It used to be, you're going down there to get your protection money from the local pizza shop. But these folks are actually changing their business model, like you said, and they're finding much easier ways to make money, like ransomware. So they're playing into that. Absolutely. But even then, from an organized crime perspective, these aren't the most sophisticated. So at the kind of top of the stack in sophistication, we talk about nation states. We talk about the fact that you have countries that are training folks to make sure that they're so sophisticated, so well adapted, that they're doing new attacks that haven't been seen before, right? And we call those 0 days. And so you've got a lot of money, a lot of resources going behind these things, to the extent that when it happens, a lot of times people don't know that it's happened, because why? It hasn't been seen before. It's novel. So nobody knows what's going on. So when we talk about 0 days, specifically with supply chain, what are we seeing there? I mean, these are all net new attacks, new exploits, right? We talked about like SolarWinds at the beginning of the year was kind of the one that is at the moment still the poster child for that, right?
Yes, absolutely. And you touched on a couple of items. So I'm going to do the same thing you did, which is there's some fascinating things. So if you look at it from the sense of, let's say, the mafia, right? We'll use them as a term here, not to annoy anyone from the mafia. This is just an example.
There's people listening right
exactly.
now.
I'm always worried about that. So let's use that example. We'll use that example, and we'll say, okay, great. So you've got an industry or a segment that is digitizing their business model, right? So the mafia, let's say, was good at extorting people or managing supply chain in their own way, whether it be delivery or whatever conduit they had at that point in time. You look at what the software industry and innovators have done for 20 years now, and you look at companies that took digital or content that was only broadcast and they turned it into digital broadcast, right? And you're taking exactly the same types of sort of events or activities and you're digitizing them in an area in the criminal world where this wasn't the approach before. They weren't thinking about let me spin up an innovation center and go build software and create a new business model. They had their traditional ways of doing business, but the world's evolved. There's more money in new places. They have to evolve. It's a changing game. So I think that's one really interesting part of it. And then the supply chain side of it, as you mentioned, it's a fascinating problem, I think, too, and I don't think one that can get resolved anytime soon. When you look at the interconnectivity, you brought up cloud earlier, right? Anyone can go to the cloud and buy something. You have this challenge of the same problem within the industry, right? So there's only so many providers. Everyone's using containers. Everyone's using, at least all modern companies are using containers and DevOps practices. Like the methodology for executing it still comes down to a handful of key vendors and suppliers across the board. Your options for cloud are limited. You've only got primarily the big three. Certainly there's a lot of great other companies that do it too, but you're going to use one of the big three for depending on your use case. And the same with the software packages. Like there's only so many internationalization packages for your website or so many user survey packages for, again, your platform or your service or e-commerce platforms. Like there's only a limited amount, and we've seen a lot in the side of let's say like what is it? I've forgotten the name of it, but it'll come back to me. So your CMS packages, for example, like WordPress, right? Like those are always heavily exploited platforms because the people who go after that stuff know that, hey, 40% of the market or 60% of the market's using that service. So if I have a pathway in, I can get in.
That's huge. And you touched on another topic as you went through that and unpacked it, and it was extortion, right? Extortion in terms of ransomware used to mean you locked my systems down, you got me, I have to pay you in cryptocurrency, and you're going to call me if I express a desire. You'll actually call me and walk me through the steps to send you the money, so you give me back control of my files and my data. That was kind of like the olden days, and that was like single a single exploit. Then now we're seeing an advent of double exploitation, triple exploitation, quadruple exploitation, and effectively now what's coming on, they'll steal your data, lock down your systems, and say, I've now exfiltrated the data. It's not only locked and encrypted, but I've actually taken it from you now.
Sure.
And then triple is they'll actually con you again and say, hey, if you don't pay me the following payment, I'm actually going to send all this information and data to your clients, to your vendors, and so on and so forth. And we're seeing nowadays that of the people who actually pay, about 9 times out of 10, by the way, that's what I'm seeing, that people are actually paying still. So only like 10% of the time people are saying no to this.
Right.
So of the, let's say, 87% of the time that they do get paid, only 30% of the victims get their data back.
Yep.
Which is absurd, right? And so if I'm paying for something, oh, you got me, gosh darn it, and I'm going to pay you because you just popped me.
Sure.
Only 30% of the time do they actually get the data back, right?
Yeah.
So what's the idea behind that? What do we do about this?
It's there's not a lot you can do. It's actually, I think, so when I look at it strategically, right, you see, go to the national level, right, and you have people that get kidnapped in another country and get held ransom either by a gang or by another government or whatever might happen. And the U.S. always has this policy of I will not negotiate with terrorists, and it's in my opinion for a reason. The reason that you have to take that approach is that what happens is exactly what you see in the cybercrime community, which is you don't always get those people back. Like, unfortunately, it's a horrific outcome. One thing with your data, that's more tolerable. It hurts the business, but it doesn't, no adverse effect for human beings and families. But that's the same thing. That psychology is when you get into the loop of paying for it, which is what happens. It's easier to pay. You can, when you're held ransom in this sense, you don't really have an option. Your business is essentially flat or stopped, or it's at massive risk. And so you pay it. You don't know what else to do. The reality is, to your point, the percentage of people that actually get their data back and everything can kind of go back to normal is relatively small. For the person who stole the data or locked your systems down or deployed the ransomware, their goal is to get their money and leave. They don't really care about the business. They don't care about, oh, it's so nice of you. Thanks for giving them. I owe this back to you. You were so nice. Let's transact here. Yeah. So you don't exactly have a ton of ethical people driving that, right?
Right.
So,
Right. So. So not great people.
Not great. Yeah, it goes back to the people bad, the carbon-based life form bad thing. Yeah.
Bad.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's like encourgoing bad behavior and reinforcing negative behavior, right? So if you have little kids, hey Timmy, don't touch the hot stove. Well, what's going to happen if you don't tell them to touch the hot stove? He's going to go touch the hot stove and get burnt. Okay, that's not good. So you're reinforcing bad behavior by saying, go ahead and do it again. Go ahead and do it again. Yeah. It's the same for, like if you have a pet, right?
Sure.
You want to make sure that you're going through the normal process and training to make better decisions ultimately in the end, right?
That's right. And this goes back to the people element, right? The weakest exploit inside of a company is the human being. So that's why you see so many great companies and services popping up and focusing on cybersecurity training, validation. How do I train my employees to identify a phishing email versus another? And it seems ridiculous because for most of our lives, phishing emails have been around in some form or another. But the fact that they're so effective still and so prevalent tells you what portion of the population doesn't really understand the complexity of it, doesn't know how to identify a phishing email, how to check a link, how to validate that it's going to the right place or not, or if the email seems off or different, right? And it's again, humans are the weakest component of that. The same way goes back to the business models of, let's say, I'll use the mafia for a horrific example, conning somebody into taking action, right? Or blackmailing somebody, right? Or holding their business ransom and demanding payment, whatever it might be. But it's the same business model just applied to a high-tech space. And when you've got the statistic you shared, which is roughly 80% of companies paying out for it, that's very lucrative. So why wouldn't I create a new product and a new opportunity? And as you know, there's always the guy who leads it, and then there's the fast follow companies. So you've got a lot of fast followers that are going to say, this is a market and a model that I can adopt and get into. So yeah, it's never going to get better. It's really going to be truly, how well can you educate people? What tools can you deploy? What effective systems and processes can you put behind it? And monitoring to get there. And data and analytics ultimately, from at least the side of trying to detect and get ahead of it, right? Predictive analytics. So yeah.
Over the last couple of years, the number of ransomware attacks has skyrocketed. Each and every one of those have been an opportunity for the bad guys to hone their skills. They're working on their tactics and techniques. They're They're improving their products. They're getting more and more sophisticated with every iteration. When they get into your system, they use their entry points to tease out relationships and weaknesses prior to encrypting your system. They want to know if they can turn one attack into many by breaching those connected to your systems. And they want to know how much you're willing to pay prior to sending a demand, often by checking your insurance policies. Even if you do pay up, only about 30% get their data back, and they're reinforcing the bad behavior in the process. And once you have paid, it puts a bigger target on your back. Now, attackers know you'll pay up. The best thing you can do is prevent an attack from happening in the first place. Next up in the forecast, we'll tell you what you can do to prevent a breach.
You talked about tools, people, and technology there. Practice makes perfect. We've said this forever, right? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Right.
I think that was somebody back in the day, I forget who that was, but an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Sure.
Was originally intended to be talking about fire safety and fire preparedness, and it has a lot of implication here too. I mean, it's the same thing. So if that still holds true, practice makes perfect. Make sure you're ready. We talk about incident response plans.
Sure.
We talk about having backups. We talk about testing backups on a regular basis. But, you know, to throw all that out the window for a second, one of the other big emerging themes that we're seeing nowadays as a defensive and preparation tactic is zero trust. You mentioned it before. Talk to me a little bit more about what we're seeing from a zero trust implementation perspective.
Yeah, you've got, I put zero trust in the context of configuration management, right? And what you're doing is you're really configuring your network and your services to only allow the people that you have guaranteed or granted access to come into the system at the highest level. So, for example, I know you, and we're gonna hang out or something, and I'm like, oh, Alex is safe. Let's let Alex in. Nobody else can come in, so they might not even know where the front door is, to oversimplify it. And that zero trust model at the high level concept is very powerful. The problem is managing the configuration for that type of deployment, whether it be a cloud or cross-platform, cross-service, is complicated. And again, the human factor is at play. So you see so many tools, the cloud security posture management tools that were extremely popular, and there was a big explosion of them, and many of them got acquired 4 or 5 years ago. That same pathway there translates back into zero trust is if you configure things properly, very difficult for people to get in. Secure Access Service Edge, which is, I would say, the latest manifestation of the concept of zero trust, is now trying to push that as far to the edge of the network as humanly possible. So at the point where I have a wide area network connection, or I'm even getting on the internet, let me qualify or validate that that person should even be on that network, and then I can look at what services are behind it when I give them access to. So what you're doing is, it's a bit of a layer cake, or call it concentric circles, if you will, model of let me build security out further and closer to the first touch point that user has interacting with the service or platform in general. And so those models are going to become more popular as they become easier to adopt, as they're easier to configure and deploy. And what it takes is really the digitization of everything in the pipeline, right? So not all connectivity was digitally managed, right? You've gotten there as you've gotten into software-defined networks and those other pieces, but all of them have to be there so that with one button click and one config file, one YAML file or whatever it might be, I can call it push this deployment or this model out all the way through it. So it's going to take time for companies to get there. It's just like when Agile was becoming popular in the early 2000s, or being well defined, I would say. You had early adopters and you've got late adopters, and you've got companies still trying to figure out how to do Agile software development or Agile product development. And the same is going to be true for the tech space. The only difference is it moves faster than process-driven actions, right? So new tech will be out, someone will build a new tool, someone will build a new exploit, to the zero-day concept and conversation we had a second ago. It's extremely complex. It's from that standpoint. The best pathway is staying ahead of it, right? So companies that can be proactive, plan for it, good training, look at configuration, look at the human side of all of it, probably have the best shot at staying safe.
Practice makes perfect is the punchline there for the carbon-based life form. Zero trust, not just your wife's general perspective on what you're up to on a daily basis. One of the things you touched on in there also was passwordless. So as we all sit here today, we've got 18 million passwords, and then password complexity from a policy perspective continues to go up. And we try to adapt to that. And
Sure.
then I know you still write everything down on a Post-it note and hide it underneath your computer.
Normally,
correct?
yeah. I just actually leave it on my desktop.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the
Why
easiest
hide
way.
it? Yeah.
Right, exactly. Right. So, assuming that's not a great practice, and we're talking about passwordless, what the heck does that mean? How are we even envisioning a passwordless access?
Sure. It's the concept of authenticating, right? So if I know that a certain device or behavioral pattern is allowed to get onto my systems versus a behavioral pattern or a device that isn't, then I don't necessarily need a pattern, or I don't need a specific password to block me from getting in. I can instead try to use that analytics view of the world. So I'll simplify. There's a couple different approaches to it. There's one that I think has the most merit, which is behavioral analytics. So you use your phone, you browse certain apps. If I install an application on top of your phone, right, your Android or iOS phone, and I kind of get an idea of how you generally use your phone, and I authenticate you leveraging that, so your behavioral patterns on the phone and usage are common to, let's say, Alex using that phone, then I know that more than likely, not always, but more than likely, it's you using the device. And so if you try to get onto a service, and I've said, oh, look, now Alex has taken the normal pathway of getting on. He hasn't done anything weird. He's in one of his typical IP address ranges. It's either his house or his office or his car, or he's dialed in from the airplane or whatever it might be. I can create a service that allows for passwordless authentication. And there's, again, different models and approaches that you can take when you look at these services. And it's interesting, you bring up the password challenge, right? So ignore the fact that I write my passwords, in dry erase marker, or if I write them on a sticky note. LastPass got hacked, if I remember correctly. If not, I know one of those password services has.
Right.
And that tells you something, that even if it's encrypted, even if it's a password-based service or a storage where we all feel good about it, it's likely to be exploited at some point or another.
Right.
And so the thing that's very difficult to exploit, though, is people, location, environment. So for someone to access a service from inside my house when I have at least my network locked down pretty well, someone really has to be targeting me specifically, or really looking for a pathway to try to get in, that they're going to come and try to spoof that logical pathway, whatever.
And it's not just those three; it's those three in a single moment in time.
That's right. That's right. It has to be those elements, right? It's the activity-based key, right? Like I know you were a big nerd and had a treehouse as a child and used to not let people in because you were mean.
I still do, actually.
That makes sense. And so if you think about that concept, if you don't have the secret passphrase or the secret handshake to get in, you're not. Yeah, you're out. You're out, right? So, and that's okay. It makes services more difficult to get into potentially, but for normal users, they won't. They won't really notice much of a difference. They'll just see enhanced security and actually better ease of use, right? For call it non-malicious end users.
I love it. Yeah. I love it.
Behavioral data has informed so many different industries, from retail to marketing and beyond. But now we're seeing it make inroads into cybersecurity. The good guys are using it to ensure you are who you say you are and keep others from accessing corporate systems, even if they happen to have your credentials. With the right security controls in place, an attacker has to mimic your behavior and have access to a trusted device on top of having your credentials. The Forecast's next segment will give you a sneak peek into a productized real-time ransomware attack by our Headstormers.
We talked about moving from ransomware to Ransom Operations. Think of these as your true operations groups. Think of these as just companies in Eastern Europe, in Russia. That's who's running this. I mean, they even have support systems. They're going to help you, and you'll be able to talk to a live person to help. Hey, I don't know how to pay the Bitcoin. They will talk you through it.
It's pretty amazing. There's literally a phone number, and you'll talk to someone.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, it's easy. Just click here, do this. Yeah. Set up your crypto wallet. Just transfer it by clicking this.
Yeah.
This is literally how sophisticated it's become. Yeah. It's like, oh, this is a great experience. It's been a good customer experience. I mean, I just paid $4 million, but hell, this is better than calling the utility company.
They're on the dark web. There's like a rating system, and they're like, Revo got like 4.5 stars for customer service. May's got 5. It's actually quite hilarious to see all this go out. But again, we're shifting to Ransom Operations. We're getting away from your single script kiddies, your guys that are just doing it for the lulz. We're getting it more into where it's become a business. So now, y'all want to see some
drum roll, please?
Yeah, let's do some fun stuff. Okay. Yes. Let's see here. Let's see. There we go. It actually worked. So look, this is live. This is not a fictitious thing. This is, by the way, this is a secured virtual machine that has zero connectivity anywhere. Do not try this at home, please, or on our network for that matter. So accounts payable just got a urgent payment invoice from Adobe. Okay, let's see here.
I know Adobe.
Yeah, Adobe.
Yeah, the company Adobe. Yeah,
that's right.
I should click it.
So,
do it.
Look at this. All right, let's.
But you won't do it. Oh, he did it.
Okay, well, look at this, guys.
Doesn't make any sense at all.
Hang on.
What's going on?
I don't know what this means.
Yeah, just hit the.
What is this?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I need to enable editing, of course. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, wait. Macros have been disabled. Oh, well, I have to enable the macro because the data it's not.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. We'll see. Uh-oh. 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 Oh,
That's
no.
not my desktop.
Oh, no.
That's not my...
I hate, yes, obviously, right?
Well, that's weird.
Dun, dun, dun. And we wait. We wait. And we wait. There it is. Oops. I am now encrypted. So let's go to my documents. Are my documents there? Well, sort of. I mean, I can't trust any of this at this point. I mean, look at this. This is my client proposal. I can't do anything with it. It's locked with WannaCry. And I guess I should read this, though.
Yeah. Oh.
Oh, no.
Nope.
No. What do I do now? Okay, well, I guess, look, they want me to send $300 to that Bitcoin address. Yeah, so I'm encrypted. I can't, all my files are done. And this is the WannaCry decryptor. It's version 2.0. So I've got, my files will be lost on this date. Yeah, so this is live. This has encrypted my computer. So I am unable to get to my files. So it's showing this. This is real world. This is what happens. This is WannaCry, in case that didn't come across. But yeah, this is WannaCry. This is typically what they see. As you can see, it's a pretty robust looking application that it tells them how to buy Bitcoins. They they have links that are typically in here, and then we strongly recommend that you don't remove this software or disable your antivirus, because if it removes the software automatically, you won't be able to get your files. So, good example of that. Don't click things, please. Please. If you have questions.
Yeah, so if I own a traditional business and I'm not tech savvy, like a pet shop somewhere, and I get hit with this, what's my first response? Do I call you, Clay, the FBI?
So typically your first act would be, you should have a cybersecurity incident response plan, which would dictate what you do. If you don't, you own a pet shop, so you'd have nothing. So with that, what I would say is I would reach out to typically the Secret Service and FBI, and then they will help you work with a company like us, like a Mandiant, really a lot of cybersecurity organizations to help you recover your files.
Thanks as always for tuning into the Forecast brought to you by Headstorm, with your host, myself, Julian Placino, and Alex Cherrones. As part of this vast community, we hope these tips and insights will make a difference, future-proof your business, your mindset, and help you surpass your expectations. Feel free to reach out. Our contact info is in the description. Hope to see you next time as the Forecast brings you more thoughts from industry leaders and strategies to engineer growth.